planning position right now. In the development season, that's just extreme. It's challenging right now. We're talking so many. Kathy can only do so much out there. If you're a verifier, they're so, you know, I mean, you've got to French person stuff.
They have to be shot.
A lot of
500-600 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good number. Seeing Andrews usually is very challenging.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes with the other 124.
It's community service. Right now, like public works director, it's funny. Now, all my engineering friends, we've got 4 different engineering firms.
Yeah, because I hope we don't have to make our substitutes on that tonight.
They're having to because they don't have enough engineers. It's insane. I mean, the prices are going through the roof too. It's good for the good demand for personnel. But all 4 of the engineering firms that I've talked to, and 2 others that have friends, they can't keep people staff. Whether it's in the Metroplex, whether it's in Austin, in this area, San Antonio, they're struggling. There's good and bad growth.
Now in Honda, they were saying their city manager out there, I think she used to work there. But she was saying, she was like, man, if I had kids going to college right now, like city administration, like y'all will eat for the rest of your life here. So that's pretty good. It seems like it's needed. Like, yeah, we're not the only place in Texas growing right now.
No, that's the demand. And I mean, the good thing about Texas, most city administrative positions pay well. You have a really good retirement system, TMRS, and that's what instills.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a. When you have growth, you better get some experience with growth. Because it's tough. I mean, it's tough even if you have experience with growth. They always say, the ideal situation is you have growth that's doing this. Growth starts doing this. It's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, no, you can't keep up with it. It seems our size, you're going to be staffed appropriately. I always tell people, you can be as ready as you can be. You're still not going to be as a football team. You're going to get 3 or 4 wins every year. Hope you can handle it. The biggest thing is with the
She'll probably fall asleep pretty tired.
Make sure you've got engineers helping you because you don't want to undersize the trade. Because what happens is down the road, the citizens shut down. That's what you got to go into. The streets not getting done for it.
And then you're scrambling.
Yep. It's a private sector issue. It eventually becomes a public sector issue. And that's what's very scary. I've seen first city I worked in, I mean, we were growing rapidly. We were doing 200 single family permits a month. Wow. Blowing and going. And the city just wasn't ready for it. I mean, we are extremely structured, they're still 15 years later, they're having to look at some bond issues. They need drawings or things. It just is what it is.
Doesn't go away.
No. The more development you have, the more drainage you have. You know, it's going to happen. The more traffic flow you have, the more streets are impacted.
Every time I go to a hospital, I just think about like at some point someone was like, "You got to get I-35 wider." And someone's like, "Now we got shot."
You ever should have shot? One thing about it drives me nuts because I go to Dallas every weekend to meet my girlfriend.
Oh wow!
And it is, and I take the toll road. I cuss every second. Like I hate tolls. I hate them, but I'm not gonna lie.
It's so much faster.
Oh, you can. It's a different. I mean, it's not.
Is that the one that you can go like 85 or something?
Yeah. It's like a People Parkway or something like that. Yeah. Well, the mayor and I were joking about this the other day. The only problem is right now, the 85-mile park, there's construction going on right there. So I get up to 85. It takes my Jeep a while to get up there.
Yeah.
And then like 2 miles later, it's back down to 70, 60. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. First world problems, you know. So they're complaining about it.
I would, if they haven't told you not to, I would do it. Is there something that says you can't? Really?
If they took your keys, they got a key to the house. With the boys in the school.
What do you say?
I don't know.
What's a good word?
Just here, here.
Yeah.
I'm here, that's it.
Not to work Saturday. You're literally telling them
What you know,
Not very much.
It's been hot the last couple of days. I'm not ready for this.
It's here. I'm gonna get it in cooler.
They said the UV index was 9 today. I'm gonna have to start putting sunscreen on.
Put some in his yard.
I walked around today and mowed grass today, and so I overdid myself a little bit today. Oh my God, it's jacking with me.
I guarantee you, you go on the e-box or something like that, and you see it
How are you this evening? Good, I'm all right. Good to see you.
And all the way down in the center.
April 9th is the next time I'm going out.
Not that I know of my email. I haven't gone through all my email today. I've been out all day, so. Well, it should be here though. Well, yeah, it should be here. Last one I'm seeing is from last week about
Tell me what's going on.
Great to be returned.
Man, I'm sore today from retirement. But a lot of it was self-inflicted. Could have stopped it.
I didn't find anything.
But yeah, I like it. I get to do what I want. When I
I
want.
was very impressed to open up my packet on Friday or Saturday and find 125 pages though.
I've been trying to study that thing.
Well, there's no way I'm going to get through it in the time frame provided. So
You can't.
no. I mean, it took them months to get it prepared. There's no way we're going to get through it in 48 hours.
No, not at all.
I mean, I have other things to do in this 48 hours. So this is revised numbers as of September.
What is it? Revised?
The one on the desk.
I got one puppy at the ranch.
One?
Yeah, my dad and my sister brought some out there last year after I guess they seeded out and scattered them in places around the lodge. And I got one.
You know, they'll come up year after year. They tell me that those poppy seeds will stay for years in the ground.
Here.
Well, he's been asking, my dad's been asking, you see the poppies on the lodge? I said, no.
Today.
Today when I was mowing the grass, lo and behold, there was one.
Who sent that? Yeah?
No, Purple Martin. You read Purple Martin? No.
Maybe he sent it.
You the Purple Martin?
No. That's interesting. I didn't show
I
it.
got
It didn't
3
show.
houses at the ranch, and I ain't had a Purple Martin there since I put them up 3 or 4 years ago.
Someone has them outside there.
Hi, Deborah.
Interesting. You'll find out. Well, I haven't read it,
He
so.
doesn't come in. Pastor Jim is here. He said he was back.
That sounds like it's been done, so. When did he send that? Today, 9:35? Yeah, yesterday. See, now I got new stuff here that I didn't have a second ago. There it is, okay. Here's your blue. Oh, because you sent it to yourself?
Yeah, because I got my Outlook and my personal and regular on this thing for some reason all of a sudden.
Yeah, I didn't do
It's a
that.
horrible mess.
This one only gets city mail, that's it. So,
Yeah. Gotta call that, what's her name?
oh, you can just go in.
Understanding shareholder.
You can just go in and edit, just delete accounts on your mailbox.
Well, I tried, and it gave, she did something because I wanted this on my home computer, and I was
Is your home computer on Mac?
No.
Because sometimes they talk to each other when you're not expecting them to.
I don't know, Sammy was getting mine. Because you changed that, and then I said I'd like to put this on there, so I have my Outlook. I just don't want that on here.
Yeah.
The other one. And I tried to load it on that one, it wouldn't take the server. It said it didn't accept an IP address or something.
Nope.
Thing.
Okay, we're going to call to order the March 26, 2019 regular called City Council meeting at 6 p.m. Let the record reflect that everyone is present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor protects this flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
I think it's you, Pastor.
Well, I'm actually not on the schedule tonight. Pastor Ballard was, but I'm here and he's not, so.
We're good.
We're good. We're good. So if you fold your hands and bow your heads and let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time to come together to take care of the business of this wonderful city, Castroville. Lord, we just please be with this council this evening and the mayor and guide them to do what is God-pleasing in everything that is done this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Going on to item number 5. This week we have some news from the park. David Fredrickson, our pool park manager, received his Texas Department of Agriculture restricted chemical license. This is going to make it able so that the city can purchase chemicals and be licensed to do it, fungicides, herbicides, stuff like that, which is a good thing. From the airport, from Mike Fisher, our airport manager, Airport Security Plan Phase 3, the installation of security fencing and electronic access control gate is complete. New signage will be posted this week, which time the electronic access control will go into effect. And he reports that TxDOT will be bringing a pavement engineer down to examine our runways, taxiways, and aprons on April 2nd. This will allow us to plan for future pavement and maintenance projects. That all, Mike? Good stuff. And then we have Jeremiah Jacobs has fulfilled his requirements to get a Class B wastewater treatment operator's license. That's a good thing. Gives us some backup for wastewater treatment. Good job, Jeremiah. And then from the library, Desmond London on London Street. I always like that. Rescuing Texas History Project, which was done to digitize some of the Castroville, Texas history collection, was a success and is available through our link on our library website. It's something we all will probably look at. Probably some good stuff there. Our teen young adult series of programming will begin on Thursday, April 25th. The summer camps and summer reading programs are almost final and will be available for sign up on April 20th. In April is Poetry Month, and the library will have an event coming up in early May for details to come. That's it. Moving on to item number 6, consent agenda. Anyone have any changes? If not, could I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move we accept them as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 7, we have one gentleman that has signed up for citizens' comments. Mr. Cherry.
Thank you all. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing a great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate your service. The reason I'm here tonight is because I saw on the agenda there's a presentation by a certain firm, Friesen Nichols, that we have used in the past. And after being on that side of the diocese, I would strongly recommend with caution any interaction the city of Castroville has with that agency. Just take a long, hard look at the quality of work that has been provided to the city in the past and how much it's cost us. And that's all I have to say. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 8, recognition of the winning entry of the annual Poppy Poster Contest. Arnie? Pat, who's doing it?
Well, I'm going to do it and Arnie's going to finish it.
Okay.
Just 2 quick asides. I was contacted today by a filmmaker producer in Austin who is bringing a crew down here to film our poppies. He didn't say why, but I'm meeting him tomorrow to show him around town. And just before I left, KSAT ran a rather lengthy segment on the Poppy House with the reporter encouraging everyone to come down and see Castroville's beautiful poppies, which I thought was pretty nice.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
So, the Poppy Festival Poster Contest update. 3 years ago, we started the contest. We had 24 entries. This year, we had 35. About 70% were students, a great number in middle school. The contest is divided between student and adults. We gave this year a $400 cash award to the winning student and the winning adult, $100 to each second place. This year we were able to award, this is new, 4 special judges awards of $25 gift certificates given by Herwick's Art Supply. Also this year Brian Persine funded a $100 People's Choice Award, which garnered over 2,000 ballots. Most of all, I'd like to thank the Castroville Area Economic Development Council for being the sole sponsor and for providing all the cash awards. So that's my part. Now it's Arnie's turn.
Mine is going to be briefer than Pat's probably, but economic development, yes, I've been proud to be involved with this and sponsor this for the last 3 years, and now we hope it keeps going, and we end up basically being the bank and helping do some of the promotional things for it. The idea for starting it actually was Pat's, not anybody else in economic development. This year, as in the past, we've given the city a framed copy of the winning poster, and this year Sofia Arguelles is the winner, and I would like for the mayor to come down and she will present you with it. Here's what it looks like. Sophie's Sophia's she's a junior at high school and super duper artist.
Good deal. Congratulations. Great job. We're going to hang that at the airport.
That's too far off in the country.
I think so, right? Thank you so much.
And the other is the posters from this year are all still hanging in the Magnolia filling station. They'll be there for 2 weeks yet. Anybody wants to go and look at them. And also, if you wish to buy either autographed by the artist or unautographed posters of this year, they're available, as well as some of the posters from the last 2 years, and that's all at the Magnolia filling station as well. So we want to thank them for being the location for letting us put them all up. Other than that,
Great.
thanks, Sophia.
Congratulations.
Enter next year.
I guess we put it next to the 2008.
I'm going to hang those, I really am. That's
Yeah.
really nice.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah. Okay, going on to item number 9, recognition of police officer Ashley, Reserve Sergeant Mike, and Assistant Terry. Brian?
Everybody's working today.
And Mike's the only one here.
Couldn't be here tonight. She's in class. She will be receiving her 10-year pin. Also, she's received her Master Peace Officer certification, which is a pretty big accomplishment.
Wow.
For Ashley.
That's a big deal.
Yes, it is. And Terry has received her intermediate telecommunication certification. We want to give out a couple outstanding awards, service awards. First to Mike Fisher. Mike started with the police department in 2014 as a full-time patrol officer. About a year and a half into his tenure, we had a reserve officer who had been there for a year, and Mike kindly stepped aside so this young man could have a job. Mike didn't need one because he's got like 15 retirements coming up. But he was nice enough to stay on in a reserve capacity. He actually ran our reserve program. He was promoted to sergeant. He did all the backgrounds and the hiring of the screening of the new reserve officers. And after he got through doing that, then he took on the new warrant position out at the airport, and then you guys stole him away and made him the airport manager. So we appreciate your service, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Good job.
Patrick Tinetha became our PD chaplain in 2015. He's been a great resource for the officers when they're having issues. They know they call him 24/7. He lives across the street from the police department. He drives. He also has we do a Sunday school type class for the officers, and he comes in on his day off and teaches that to us. So we really appreciate his hard work and dedication to the police department. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Pose for a picture.
Thank you.
The opportunity to serve.
Okay.
Do a radio program right
All right.
Fun.
Item number 10, presentation and approval of the 2018 annual audit report and fourth quarter financial report. Terry?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kim Roach with Armstrong Vaughn and Associates is here to present the audit, which I am extremely pleased with, considering what we went through. And then that was not included in your packet, that's at your seat, is the fourth quarter budget report that correlates to the financial statements. I apologize for not giving it to you last week. I had a family emergency and I was ill too, so it was a little bit difficult to get it out, but I think it's pretty straightforward and it does balance to the financial statements. So Christy and I are here to take, if you have any questions on that, and Kim will talk about the budget, or the audit. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Council. It's wonderful to be here this evening. As always, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to get to work with your city. First and foremost, I have to say thank you to staff within management, as well as everyone that works with us to help us get this audit report done. It certainly takes a lot of hard work and patience, but we're happy to be here with you this evening. If you've got your bound copies there in front of you, I'll kind of just touch on some highlights within the audit report. We did give what's called an unmodified opinion. That's the best that we can give. Essentially, that's a clean opinion, as a lot of people commonly refer to it. And what that means is that the financial statements were materially correct after some audit adjustments that we proposed as part of some items just routine accruals and some items just as part of the year-end reconciliations. So if you will actually turn in your bound reports to pages 14 and 15. If you've had a chance to review one of our audit reports or any audited financial statements that follow under the GASB statement of number 34, you may recognize this, or this may be a little bit of a refresh for you. But for anyone who has not been accustomed to seeing this type of layout, what this particular report presents is this is the entire city on a full accrual basis, which would basically be like how a business would be run. So you can see your first column there, the governmental activities. That represents your general fund, your special revenue funds, as well as your debt service funds. Those are not usually reported on an accrual basis, and we'll see some of those differences here versus the way you normally would typically budget or see your finances reported to you. But certainly it's important to point out a couple of items on this particular report, so that's why I call your attention to it. The second column is going to be your business type activities. That represents all of your utility funds, including the water acquisition impact fees, as well as your utility capital projects funds, and finally even your airport fund, simply because it is a proprietary type nature fund, so it is reported in this business type. So that's just kind of to give you a feel of what funds are making up these two columns, and then of course the third column there being the total. So if you'll notice on page 14, one of the major differences in this type of report versus the ones we'll go over here in just a minute is this includes, again, all those long-term accruals like a business would. So they include your long-term assets, and that includes primarily your equipment, your buildings, your infrastructure, any type of asset like that that you don't typically see going forward on your balance sheet. They're reported here. So looking in the total column, you'll see after including all of the city's infrastructure, you actually, after depreciation, have about just over $41 million worth of total assets. And the majority of that certainly is within the city's buildings and equipments and infrastructure, but you can see there that you had in your liquid cash, you had just shy of $7.2 million. That's up at the very top. You also had about halfway down through those total assets, you had some restricted cash, and a lot of that represents the remaining project money from the projects that were funded by the Texas Water Development Board that are still held in escrow, as well as some other local money that you have in Castroville State Bank that's considered restricted in nature, largely still for those projects. Any questions on any of that? All right, well, if you'll turn over to page 15. And I'll certainly entertain any questions at the end as well, but on page 15, To contrast all the long-term assets being on here, you'll see all your long-term liabilities. So now you're going to see all your bonded debt, including those projects, again, that were funded through the Water Development Board. You also have a couple of other items, one of which is brand new to you this year. Not necessarily new in nature, but new in presentation here. You may recall, if you've been on council for several years, there was a new standard that was established a few years ago that said not only did you need to report just in the information, but you had to report a liability for any unfunded future retirement expense. Well, they've now, this year, they did a sister standard, if you will. It's exactly all the same wording, but it now encompasses any other post-employment benefit that you may have. And through the Texas Municipal Retirement System, there is one additional benefit that's considered one of these other post-employment benefits. So that's a new line that you have here on your financials this year. And it's often referred to as an OPEB, and that's simply the acronym of the other post-employment benefits. So if you look there under your total liabilities, you'll see certainly your bonded debt is the majority of your total liabilities, but you can see those other two liabilities related to the pension and the OPEB underneath there. But the important point to point out here is that if you look under your net position, essentially what we're saying here is that the city as a whole has a positive net position, and that's a good place to be. And even after you take out the amounts that are invested within the city's infrastructure or any items that are restricted, even your unrestricted net position, meaning basically what's available for current operations, after all of that debt and everything, is still a positive figure. So it's, again, a positive sign there. Any questions on all the long-term business comparison? Well, that said, then let me have you turn over to page 18. I'm going to go through this piece a little bit quicker, simply because this is a little bit more along what you should be accustomed to seeing from your regular financial reports that are presented from the city internally. This is now going to be just talking about just those governmental activities. So you can see the general funds now by itself in the first column. All those other funds I referred to before, all the special revenue, all the debt service, those are all now combined into that second column, the detail of which is all later in the report, but just for quick time's sake, I'll just have you refer to the total here as they're immaterial individually in nature. So in your general fund, you can see that you actually had total assets of $2.1 million, almost 2.2. After liabilities, you can see down below you had fund balance of just shy of $1.8 million. And I went ahead and did a quick calculation of what your average operating expenditures held in your unassigned fund balance, and you're actually sitting at about 6.5 months as it stands right there at 9/30/2018. Any questions on that? Well, part of the reason why you have that 6.5 months is if you'll turn over to pages 20 and 21. These are the same columns we just referred to before, but now we're looking at your revenues and expenditures. Your total revenues for the general fund were just over just shy of 2.6 million, and that actually was a positive variance compared to your final budgeted amounts by about $57,000. So your revenues came in higher than you budgeted. Your expenditures, you can see down below, were a total of $3.3 million. Now that actually fell below your final budget, again another positive variance, by actually about $471,000. So you can see it was very conservative spending by the city. And the majority of that savings from the final budget to the actual numbers came from the street repairs project. I know there was quite a bit included within the budget, and not all of that cost had actually been incurred as of September 30.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Did the staff give you corroborating documents to about what you just said?
Yes, they give me corroborating documents for everything. That's how we get to this opinion.
So when you make statements like, we did save money because of this and that, they gave you you documents that showed that?
Well, I should clarify, just based on how you worded it just now, as far as the savings, I'm looking at as far as what was budgeted compared to what was actually incurred as of September 30. I believe that street repair project obviously continued on into FY19, so just at the point of September 30, 2018, what had been incurred was less than what was included in the final budgeted figures.
Right, so you're not actually including it was it should have lasted that long for the project and all that sort of stuff.
No, ma'am.
Even if it were extended, that shows we saved something.
As of September 30.
Even though it went through the next budget cycle when it shouldn't have.
Right. A lot of course, what we're dealing with has to do with timing. So, as of September 30, it looks like it was less than what was budgeted, but that's certainly not to say that it was complete. If that project obviously continued on into FY19, it could end up going over what the budget said, and that's not necessarily reflected here. Correct.
Period.
It wouldn't show as far as this year goes. Yes, ma'am. So after those revenues and expenditures, you'd see there that your general fund would have had a loss for the year of $700,000. But the reason why, again, as I mentioned before, that you're actually sitting at that 6.5 months is if you'll look at the top of page 21, you'll see that that deficit from just your revenues and expenditures incurred within the general fund were offset by a transfer in from the utility fund. And of course, that's certainly because a lot of the salaries for the staff are recorded in the general fund, even though they're serving multiple funds. And so I know there's that transfer that comes in from the utility to help cover those costs. And so therefore, the overall general fund actually had a positive change in fund balance by $120,000. Any questions on that?
And you also have documents on that, so we know what that transfer, what specific things that transfer is paying for in salaries and administration in the general fund.
It doesn't actually break it down to say, for penny, this is what makes up that transfer. That transfer is something that's just it's included as part of the budget process. And so those actual transfers that go through generally mirror the budget that was approved.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, just real quickly, and just to try to wrap up, I also want to touch on the airport and utility again. So if you'll turn on page 23. These are a lot of the numbers we saw as part of the totals from earlier when we were looking at the entire city. Again, because these funds are considered business type already, because they're proprietary in nature, they don't lose those long-term items. But now you can see them individually between the utility and the airport. So I'm just going to, since I already kind of included these in the total before, I'm just going to touch on page 24. You again had a total positive net position in both the utility as well as in the airport. And that includes even within your unrestricted net position. So after, essentially all the infrastructure and all the restrictions are removed, even your unrestricted is positive. And so lastly, just to look at the revenues and expenses for the airport, you'll see there on page 25, turning over a page, about halfway down, you can see that your actual operating income for the utility would have been close to $1.9 million. But again, if you continue to look down, that operating income also has to include paying on the interest for the debt. That's a lot of those, again, those projects that are funded by the Water Development Board. The interest related to those debt, as well as any other bonded debt you would have in the utility fund. You can see interest expense below. There's also the transfers that we just referred to the general fund. So all of that brings your actual change in your utility fund down, but still to a positive number of $876,000. In the airport fund, you'd see that it did actually have an operating loss of $65,000, but I just want to point out that one of the reasons why that is the case is the main thing in the airport is there is actually quite a bit of infrastructure out there. So you'll notice just above that $65,000 loss, again, I'm about halfway down the page there, the last expense that you see listed above that is the depreciation, and depreciation, of course, would be a non-cash item. So if you remove this, there actually would have been a positive change in net position for the airport, but certainly we have to account for the depreciation of the infrastructure out there.
It seems like a lot of depreciation.
Yes, sir. There is a lot that's capitalized out within the airport, and one of the items actually that's now capitalized is, of course, the jet fuel farm that was just completed this fiscal year. So even additional.
It's a large asset.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of assets out there.
Okay.
Could I ask
Yes, ma'am.
Another question. Everybody's aware that we had some issues with something that wasn't in the budget for sludge removal, and it wasn't, council didn't vote on having it put in this budget as an amendment. So I'm assuming it will be in our next budget?
Actually, that sludge removal, you're referring to, it was, I believe, 88,000 or something?
No, they wanted 350, I think. It came up in our meeting a while ago.
I may let Jerry answer to that, just to make sure.
The sludge removal that I think you're discussing is in this current year, and this is the sludge removal from prior year. The 80,000 that was budget approved, that was in last year, so that is covered by this report. And so even with that, we
budget more.
Yes, we should have budgeted more, but even though we didn't budget more, we still came in under budget by being frugal in other areas.
Okay.
Well, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have, but one other item I did want to just briefly mention to you in passing is that certainly related to the large projects that you had going on this year, because they were federally funded. One of the additional items we were required to do again this year, this was actually our second year in a row, was that we were required to perform a single audit as well. And that simply just means that we were required to make sure that you were in compliance with the requirements from the federal government related to those project funds. And so the projects that we tested this year was your clean waters projects. And so essentially that included the wastewater treatment as well as the East Side lift station. I'm happy to report that we found no compliance issues, and we gave still what's called an unmodified opinion on the single audit as well.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I want it to be clear that when you do the audit, staff does not just give you numbers that you plug into this. You verify your information. There has to be hard copies of the figures you put in there. You aren't being provided figures. You're auditing and verifying the figures that you're putting in here. Is that correct?
That's correct. They start off by giving me figures, but then, yes, sir, I'm looking to see what made up those figures, down to probably more detail than a lot of firms would. So they get to see me for a long time.
Would you explain how much you verify, how you verify a figure for me?
Yes, sir. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll kind of approach it from the balance sheet initially, simply because a lot of the timing and accruals are going to impact the balance sheet. So we're looking, for instance, we start at the top. We go down cash, and we want to look and see, are those bank statements reconciled? And not only are they reconciled, do those reconciliations make sense? Are there unusual items on there? And then we continue to go down. Were there revenues received in the next fiscal year that perhaps relate to this fiscal year that should be accrued back to, in this case, of course, I'd be referring to FY18. And if so, then we want to either verify that accrual that management may have already done, or we want to propose an accrual to management to get it in the right fiscal year. So we kind of approach it from a balance sheet side, but we're certainly going to end up looking, and then so, at some point, for instance, your ad valorem, we're going to go through the tax collector and their appraisal district, and we're going to look and see what were the collections and what was the appraised value, and was that reasonable based on the information provided from them. The sales tax we get from the state of Texas, the comptroller's website, and we can verify those numbers as well. So, I mean, we just kind of start at the top, and that's why I say we're out here for a while. Obviously, when we get down to the expenditures, we want to look and see, do we see this particular item go through the, the PO process, and did it have a substantial invoice to support it? If it's of a large dollar figure, I've already read all your council minutes to see if it was even discussed or approved within the council meetings.
So there's some detail behind your numbers?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Very much.
Thank you.
So I have one more question.
Yes,
on the water, the one you chose, the water...
the clean water testing?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So the extra monies that were, left over from the projects those monies were given to us for, or that we got, those extra monies, like it's $1 million on one, and there's a lot of extra money with those projects. So obviously they came in under bid.
Yes, ma'am.
So how does that line up with a savings?
That's a great question. One thing from our perspective from the audit, what we're certainly trying to do is give an opinion on the financial figures that are presented here. So while we're verifying, as Mayor Kelly just said, we are certainly going to verify the expenses that are recorded against those invoices, but as far as whether or not it went over or stays under the original project estimate, that's not really within the scope of our audit. We're certainly going to be keeping aware of it, certainly change orders, again, as I mentioned, if those are discussed.
Problem. So many change orders, even though these things came under bid. We ended up doing all these change orders afterwards.
Sure.
But
Well, so I'm certainly going to read within the council meeting minutes that y'all, discussed those change orders and whether or not they were approved. I saw, of course, where some were, not necessarily approved. So I'm kind of watching for that. But as far as whether or not the project was efficiently performed or came in from the original estimate, that's kind of outside the scope.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Great questions.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I went through the 80 pages very carefully, and I had a piece of paper I was keeping track of things I wanted to ask the staff about. And I just want to confirm, I got to the last page, and I hadn't written anything down on the paper that was derogatory, that was improperly done, that should raise a concern to me as a councilman. I felt like I was reading a report that was a very positive report. I just want to get a kind of an affirmation from you before I say what I'm going to say next.
Okay. Well, certainly I will tell you that in every audit's case, regardless of what findings there are, there's always an additional letter that we're required to list certain communications to you all. And so hopefully you received a copy of that letter. If there is anything that needs to be communicated outside the minimum requirement, as I mentioned, there's always going to be things that we're required to communicate regardless each year. For instance, I mentioned that new standard that was put into place. That's one of the items in that letter. We're required to communicate that to you. But certainly if there's any concerning areas, they would fall into that letter. So one of the items that we're required to communicate is whether or not there's any significant adjustments. We did have a couple of adjusting entries that we felt like, needed to be listed in that letter, but nothing that I feel like staff didn't work very hard to help get us to this point. They certainly helped me get all the information I needed. Anything I requested of them, they were certainly diligent in trying to get that information.
I have to ask another one. I'm sorry, and I'm interrupting again. In the journal.
Wait a minute, hold on.
I wasn't quite finished.
Kurt's talking right now.
Still talking?
I just wanted to get that affirmation because I want to say to the staff, I really think you should be complimented. This is not an easy task. You can tell when you read it, there was tremendous amount of work, and not just in finance, in the whole city staff, because it takes a lot of inputs. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that the staff did a very professional job all year long doing their job, and I just want to acknowledge that and tell you that I think this is a very good report. And I would like, when we're finished with the audit report, I have a question about the fourth quarter, but I'll hold that till we get to it. Thank you.
On page 12, it shows economic factors and next year's budgets and rates.
Yes, ma'am.
We've had, and everyone's quite aware, a lot of people resign, quit, and some of them quit in the budget year that you audited.
Yes, sir.
So that salary that wasn't paid, and that's still, you still considered the entire salary as if it were paid, because they were high-paid positions, like, the public work person and our assistant administrator.
Correct. So yes, ma'am. So basically, what's reflected as actual expenditures are what actually was incurred, and what's in the budget is, of course, when the budget was originally adopted, it may have included.
But it doesn't matter as long as we stayed in that amount of money.
Correct. So I just want to make sure that, but our actual figures only represent any actual salary or whatever expenditures that would be incurred. So for example, of course, I know when the previous city administrator resigned, there was an agreement as far as some additional dollars and some essentially payout too of her vacation and everything. So since those actually were paid and incurred, those are represented within the line item. And that's actually why there was as much of an increase as there was, for instance, in that particular department within salaries from 2017 to 2018, because that was sort of an unusual bump. However, that
130,000?
Let's see, that was...
130,000, it's on the budget report. Oh,
gotcha.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. One of the things I want to mention, since Councilwoman St. Lebanon asked the question, is a lot of what they do in the audit doesn't necessarily come from us. They go out and verify from, like she said, the tax, the appraisal district. One of the things we were kind of worrying about whether or not we were going to be able to bring it tonight is we were waiting for confirmation from the appraisal district and from the Water Development Board. So they get confirmation from them. They send out independent bank verifications, those things I sign saying, okay, we need this information, but they go directly to the auditor. We don't get a lot of this information. It goes directly through them. So a lot of this audit is independent verification, not just verification from us. So just to, I hope that reassures you. Anyway, so that being said, if you have any questions on the budget, the quarterly financial or budget report,
I don't want to be a hog.
Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. First, on page 1, on the general fund, you have nothing in here that helps me understand how the RV park is doing. It's all lumped together with Parks and Rec. And I thought when we discussed it 6 months ago that I thought there was consensus that we were going to try to provide much greater visibility of the RV park so we could determine if our revenues were equal to or greater than our expenses. But there's only one line for Parks and Recreation, so I can't tell anything
okay,
about
so in this report is basically done on it's to report to you on the fund level. That is our responsibility and your responsibility. So what we've done in this report is, in order to be more transparent and give you more information, is we've expanded that to give you more information than we're really required to do. And we went not only to we went from the category to the department. So in this report is kind of that's kind of outside the scope of this report. We have that information, and that will be provided to you during the budget process, and at such time as we might bring to council and report that on an individual basis. So no, so even though it is lumped in with the Parks and Recreation, because that is the department that it falls under.
Okay, I understand that for revenues. And on page 4, where you start showing the individual sections, you show Parks and Rec, Animal Control, and Pool. And I have the same question. Why don't we have a section for
okay,
RV?
So the Parks and RV Park is not considered a department. Parks and Recreation is the department that the RV Park falls under. It falls under a category type thing, not a what is the personnel services? What is that called when you lump it with personal services and personnel? Those are the categories. So this would be a I can't think of a subdivision or whatever of the Parks Department. So it's going to all be lumped together into the Parks Department of those categories. So.
But the pool is not lumped in.
The pool is an actual department. We did not.
Let me ask the question another way. Should we as a city be considering making the RV park a department?
If council desires to do that, we can certainly do that. At this point, I would say right now, we really don't have enough information or history to make that really, feasible. But maybe in the future, if that's what council desires to do, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. I have one other question on the utility fund. Back on page 1 of 2 on the utility fund, the first page, where you show down at the bottom sewer. contracted services, sludge removal. Now, I'm confused. I thought I'd been following the numbers pretty closely in our previous discussions, but I just need a little explanation how we ended up at the end of the year $322,284 when we were only budgeted, I thought we were budgeted down around 150. This says we were budgeted at 190. I recall we discussed a lot of bills that we authorize you to pay. Is that what the 322 is when you add them all up?
So the majority of that is a sludge removal, and when Christy and I went over what these detailed, we just put the majority of it. I'll be happy to give you the detail of all those things. That's going to be contracted service, I believe. I don't have all that information with you, so I can't. So forgive me. Oh, wait a minute, I do have that information with me. Maybe. Let's see. Let's see if we brought that. But
maybe
that's going to
be another way. Is there more money in here than what we approved at the last discussion when we had this a few meetings ago? We approved you to pay that $86,000 bill. That was the outstanding bill for removal of sludge.
That's current year.
Is there anything newer than that you paid?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I am aware of.
Thank you.
I have not looked at that, honestly, but I will. But no large bills have come across, and I see every bill that goes through the city.
And the contractor said he was owed no more money.
I knew we were even with him, but this number looks a lot bigger.
This is prior year, and that's going to include other contracted services, and it includes some closing entries and some adjustments and that kind of stuff. But I don't have that detail right now. But that wasn't just sludge removal.
Thank you.
But we'll be happy to go over that with you if you wish.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have one.
Okay.
Page 1 of 1, the airport fund and revenue and expense report. So our fuel sales, we know, aren't going well. So we budgeted for 288 and only got 177. And so that's an overall loss to the airport, even though we have a capital gain with the grant. So it shows we should have had more money, right? Bottom line, that's all I'm saying.
Bottom line, we over budgeted in fuel.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. That's what I was trying to.
We missed it.
Yeah.
Live and learn.
And that's something we need to work on.
We're going to do it better this year. Yes.
Yeah.
It was our first year in that market.
And we now have Mike Fisher here and different staff, different ways of looking at it.
That's a pretty volatile area to budget.
And it's hard to budget. Yeah. I think we budgeted that the prices would go up, and they didn't go up as much as we had figured. So.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, ladies. You did a very good job. Thank you so much.
Do you need a motion to approve this report?
There's no action.
Presentation and approval.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, there is an action. You need you to...
Don't we have to have a motion to approve it?
Motion to accept the audit and approve the financial statements. I'm sorry, to the budget.
I make a motion that we accept the audit report and the fourth quarter financial report as presented.
Second motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 11, discuss and take appropriate action on applications submitted for open positions on city boards. Deborah, you got some stuff for us?
Excuse me. Yes, we have 2 applications tonight. One is the lady that came last council meeting and was put on the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
And she had put as a second choice the library, and I contacted her after Mr. Dyer, Councilman Dyer asked me to maybe see if she'd consider it, because we do need someone on the full board. She did say she would love to serve, and so her application is back in here for the library position. And then also Kyle McVeigh came in and submitted an application for the Parks and Recreation Board, which we do have openings for that.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay.
Make a motion, we accept Ms. Kumpian for position number 4
Second.
on the library board.
No, and I'll second that.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then we've got the next one, Parks and Rec. Anybody else want to make a motion?
Go for it.
I make a motion that we approve Ms. McVeigh for permanent position number 3 on the Park and Recreation Board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank y'all. I'll let them know.
Okay, moving on to item number 12, update and possible action on street program. Lee?
Thank you, Mayor. Staff and the mayor were looking to actually get the street program, trying to get it going as quickly as possible. And part of the challenge, interim public works director checked with the recent contractor that's helped us with this, and currently they are in the Metroplex with their resources allocated up there and everything. And so at this meeting, it would be difficult to move forward with the street program and be able to give you guys as much advice and guidance of how we need to. And so what we would like to do is actually delay this item maybe to next meeting to be able to provide a little more attention to that and maybe be able to start the program during that timeline.
Okay. So you want to skip over it. Do I have a motion to table this?
I will move that we table this item to the next council meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 13, discussion and appropriate action on approving a service agreement for planning services with Freeze and Nichols. Lee?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Currently, when I came on board, I think it was the end of January 28th, in that range, our community service coordinator, which I'll kind of term generically as the planner, which that was the function in a lot of those roles that was fulfilled with that position, became vacant. I believe she now is in a similar position with the city of Hondo. Part of the challenge that has gone on, we have a service that provides building inspections, those types of things. It can look at zoning. Part of the challenge that's going on right now with a lot of interims and different things that we're waiting to hire, with the development season that has begun to increase, the amount of calls from developers, engineers, exponentially. I always say when you start mowing your grass, it exponentially grows, the amount of calls. Development is coming. We're looking at a lot of plats, a lot of developments, a lot of zoning questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? Before I was here, I think there was a modular home discussion that's been going on, and I believe Laura, the previous coordinator, was heading up. Well, part of the challenge that we're looking at right now, any land development ordinances, with me helping so much with public works, helping so much with planning, also doing the city administrator position, it's very difficult to give quality time to that. And so we've also advertised the position. We've had 3 applicants that have applied for that position, and 3 people, they don't really meet the qualifications to be able to do the position. So we've kind of begun to run into a situation where timing-wise, I think when the permanent administrator comes on board within the next probably 60 days, you'll have someone here for that one. They'll probably look at maybe some restructuring, maybe look at this creating a planning director position, maybe increase pay, look at some different things, because the challenge that we're facing is there's such a demand in Texas. Whether we're talking with our engineers right now, and I have engineering friends, every firm right now, every Monday is like, we don't have enough engineers within development. We don't have enough public works directors. We don't have enough planning directors. It's a difficult situation right now, and we're a city that is on the cusp of major growth, as we're all aware of, that's coming up. It's very valuable to give very more intense and quality time to planning. And right now, we don't have the staff and or time to be able to provide that quality time, that expertise, whether it's the planning commission or council might have some in-depth discussions, or developers. And so one thing that I did in my last interim city administrator position in just outside of Fort Worth is Freeze and Nichols has a planning service to be able to provide. A lot of engineering firms have gone into the business of planning also. Engineering planning is separate from land development planning. A lot of people can get that confused easily. Planning is looking at your water, your wastewater, those types of things. Planning is, what type of zoning do we do? Future land use plans, zoning, how do we do these types of things? And Friesen Nichols has done a very good job in other cities that I've been in, whether it be comprehensive plans or actually planning services in my last city. We have looked, the two major interim services in Texas, SGR, Texas First, there's no planners available right now. And so one thing I think with the interim gap until we can have this position filled, and probably that'll be after the permanent administrators on board, what I asked Friesen Nichols to do is come up to a scope similar to what we had in the city of Runaway Bay, which is still using them a year later after I've left to fulfill similar services, is to help us with planning. There's up to $25,000 would be the cap on this service to be able to provide assistance to help the city. And in the current budget, you have approximately 8 months that this position has been vacant. So there's monies available to fund that service, but it's going to be very challenging to meet the quantity and quality of service that the developers and the development community is needing right now. And Kathy, who's done an amazing job of helping with a lot of this stuff, is not trained in land development. She's shielding a lot of these things, but we're not able to get to developers on time. When I leave, a lot of times on Fridays, we've tried to keep my time at about 40 hours, as close as we can. I'm getting calls from developers, engineers, constantly about development questions. And quality and quantity, it's hard to give those answers right now. And so what staff would recommend is to enter a service agreement with Friesen Nichols Planning Services to help us with planning questions and providing those services.
Okay, I have a question for you. So we currently use Bureau Veritas to review plans.
Yes, sir.
For developers that come in. So somebody comes in and submits a plan, it goes to Bureau Veritas to be reviewed. So what planning are these people going to do? What is it that they're going to do that Bureau Veritas is not doing?
Bureau Veritas looks at the development of a home primarily. What they would look at would be site plan from a planning, from the setbacks, these types of things. Are they meeting all the extra requirements that go on with it? Rezoning questions. Does this meet your zoning standards? That's what the planning side, they would be helping. Preliminary subdivision plats is looking at it from a zoning perspective. They would look at it from a different one. Bureau Veritas is more of the structural, this is how we're building the home. That's primarily what they're doing. Is it sprinkled? Is that required? The planning and zoning would come from setbacks, right-of-way acquisition, those types of things.
Okay. So this gentleman you're talking to that you're bringing on is interim public works. He has planning experience. He wouldn't be able to do this?
Planning experience would not be, I mean, his background would be planning with the physical infrastructure, would be water and wastewater, that his planning background is. The challenge that we face is everybody has generic, usually if you're in public works, you have a very broad global back.
Disruptive. See nothing. Somebody's leaving in a hurry.
Oh.
Okay.
They have broad generalized background, but part of the challenge is right now is even with that individual, if he did have more in-depth knowledge, and my background's in planning and land development, but people are so stretched out right now, the volume is not there to be able to do it because developers like a quicker response, and I can understand that time is money. Part of the challenge is everybody's stretched so thin right now, we can't keep up with the volume to be able to provide that. And usually public works people have a very generalist background in planning and zoning. We need more detailed stuff, especially if it's the commercial development on Highway 90. That's going to be a key corridor in that area, looking at and making sure signage, those types of things. There's a lot of questions right now with signage, and we just don't have the time to look at it.
Okay. So wasn't weren't they Friesen Nichols, right? Is that the name?
Yes, sir.
Weren't they the city engineer before, and we got rid of them because they weren't any good?
Are these individuals that we're looking at from the Austin office, I believe?
They would be out of San Marcos would be the planning that we'd be working with.
The planning is separate from the engineering. Different services, I mean, they are the same organization, but it's a division or department out of there.
I think it's really important to make the distinction between people who review plans and planners, because people who review plans look at what's already been done and how it fits, and planners have to look to principles and applications of theories for the future. And,
Yes.
and I think that's, with the fact that the word plan is in both of them is very confusing to most people.
So our firm that our city engineer that we use, they don't have a planning department? They don't do this same service?
No, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? I just have a concern that this is a firm that
we're just looking.
We didn't want to use anymore, and we went to a different firm. It seems like we're stepping back into it. I don't know if this is a different division or...
You indicate in here that Chance Sparks will be the designated representative in San Marcos.
Right.
He's the planning engineer that you would use on a regular basis.
Yes, sir. He would be our
What I'm trying to understand is, so if you have an issue and you need a planning engineer to do something, you would call this person in San Marcos and explain what your need is.
Yes.
And they would expend hours against the rate they quoted and produce you an answer to your question.
Yes, sir.
And if they had to travel, we'd have to pay for the travel.
Yes, sir.
Now, how often will you get to look at the expenditure rate of the $25,000?
That would be provided monthly.
So you'd be able to tell us on a monthly basis how much you've used and if it was worth it to you that you got answers? And
yes, sir.
We could see as we go along if this is actually producing anything.
Yes, sir.
I don't think you got any other place you can go to get these answers.
There's not, and that's part of the challenge. Our hands are tied, to be honest. You know, the development community, you know, it's one of those things, the way we're structured right now, which for the intermediate and long term is good, but the here and now, it's tough right now to provide these answers, and we're in the middle of the development season, and there's just not a lot of, the biggest challenge, interim planning directors just aren't available right now.
Since the money's available, Mr. Mayor, and we haven't spent it this year, I would support some kind of an initiative to get the expertise, as long as we get feedback and we don't end up in a situation like Mr. Cherry alluded to during citizens' comments of you find out later that you've spent way more than you thought. So if it's controllable and you're looking at it on a monthly basis, you should be able to tell us if you're getting your money's worth.
Yes, sir.
And we're looking at this as a temporary fix as well.
Yes, sir. That would, you know, I would assume, you know, looking right now, it's not looking like we're going to have a planning or a community services coordinator most likely on board while I'm here. It looks like. I would assume once you get, whether it's the community services coordinator or a planning director, if it's changed, you know, how you want to look at it, I would assume this service would go away. It's something in the future also, though, part of the challenge, it sounds like what Laura, the previous community services coordinator, part of the challenge that you face in growing communities are the quality type things. If there are plans to be looked at or ordinances, the day-to-day volume of calls, and that's the one thing that's going on right now. I mean, even the city secretary is helping me out right now, helping us. There's just, during that 9-month growing season, you know, really for about 6 months, there's such a volume of calls. And that's what I think was a challenge for Laura also. She was wanting to work on modular homes or work on the comp plans or these types of things. You just can't get that quality time right now. And a lot of times, you know, and that would be a lump sum contract if you did keep them on in services. You know, we need to look at a modular home ordinance. How much will this cost? And they, you know, you have planners in their organization that have dealt with this throughout the country, dealt with it through Texas, whether it be East Texas, South Texas, these different things. So they've got a specialization in those things that can help supplement if you guys so choose afterwards.
Is there a term? Is there a length of time here?
1 year.
1 year?
Well, yes, but the contract can be lapsed within when you're, I believe, within the month. How you would like to do that?
We can't do it for a shorter period of time.
You can break the contract. They would come back with different rates. Each year you would look at it to renew the contract. That would be possible rate changes or stuff like that. The contract can be lapsed whenever you guys would, or even if they would prefer to do it.
Our fiscal year expires October, is that correct?
Did you have fiscal year?
Yeah, our
Yes, sir.
fiscal year.
So September 30th would be the end of the fiscal year.
So,
this one.
okay, so I think that would be an appropriate window there is just to extend it through this fiscal year with the funds that are already available.
I'd like to say something. I looked at the agreement and I agree wholeheartedly that we need somebody for planning, but I don't think we need to start with a small fix. I think we need to change the whole department. Community development should not be community development, it's planning or something similar. And I think doing this, because I see the charges are for professionals, construction managers, CAD technicians, corporate project support. These are all big level, high level things. And I think we're just compounding the problem because they're going to interpret things differently once they're gone. I mean, it looks like they have free reign on understanding and codifying and explaining and interpreting, which is it's going to affect us later on. So I don't think this is going to give us the continuity we need. Now, I wouldn't mind. I talked to them. I spent the day there at the office. They don't need this stuff right now. What they need is, like you said, administrative help, someone helping them, check the zoning and all that kind of stuff. So I would be 100% for that right now, and then more time and discussion with the people who have the boots on the ground for an actual position or reorg of what we have right now.
Well, and I would assume, most likely when the permanent administrator's on board, they would look at the restructuring. I mean, I've got some ideas, but Lee leaves in 2 months. I can share my ideas with the permanent administrator, but I think it would behoove the organization and the administrator is this may be a short-term fix, yes, but the administrator also needs to be able to buy some time to look at how do we need to restructure, because with some of the shortages that we are facing out there, our interim public works director Roy and I have talked a lot is, where are we staffing wise? One thing I've asked staff, and that's as a whole, but even in public works, is where do you see the public works department 1, 3, 5 years? It would behoove, I think, the organization and the permanent administrators to let them do the restructuring, because you're entering the fiscal cycle, the upcoming fiscal year 20. Jerry, staff, and the permanent administrator, you would want to kind of try to plug those numbers into the upcoming fiscal year 20 and let that individual kind of lead the restructuring.
So I agree with you. To continue, though, what I would suggest is, that bothers me what Mr. Cherry said. It really does. Because if this particular company did these very things that you have listed, and they didn't do them properly with the city, maybe we should look at another company. But I would also ask that on page SC1, all of those things listed, I think we need to pull them out. Not all of these things are, in my mind, something that we could make continuity from with this short-term help. So maybe we'd look at these. Is this what? I'm putting you on a spot, but where did this list, like provide a planner, understand ordinances, amendments, comprehensive plan, planning processes, these are some high-level important things.
They're very high level, but keep in mind, not all these things are going to be occurred. But
So
when you can, but you also want to keep your scope of services open, because if not, let's say we do have a high-level ordinance that council or the planning commissions want to look at, and we extrapolate some of those things. Well, we've got to revise the contract. And so you want the contract to be global. I mean, as far as this process, I'm going to be, right now I am your planner. So I want to be deeply involved in this. But if the council does, the modular home stuff has not been discussed since January, right?
And we've got 2 other ordinances.
Yes, ma'am. Whether it's, there's interest in signage or these types of things. Right now, and I would respectfully say, I mean, let's say the council says tonight on the future agenda items, we want to look at modular homes. I would have to respectfully say I can't do it. I don't have time. And that's not trying to be lazy. What it is, I'm strung out time-wise. I couldn't even generate the report to send to you guys for this right now because of time constraints.
Could we reword then your FANI will provide the following services at the city's request on a regular and recurring basis? Take that part off and just say, will provide services at the city's request, for example, or encompassing but not over, without this regular and recurring? Because it sounds like they're going to be an actual part of the staff, always there to do this.
We would have to bring it back with the, honestly, that wording is just kind of their canned type stuff.
Yeah, I've sat here and listened, and I've talked to some former council about all the, I hate to use for the less of the word, shenanigans and overcharge. And to clean this up, overcharged me once, your fault. Overcharged me twice, my fault. There's bound to be, we've got Austin down the road, Houston if necessary. There's got to be some places that do this kind of work. I just cannot see myself going with a company that's taken advantage of us once and is just, in my opinion, probably just waiting to take it again.
You know, from what I'm hearing is, I don't think it's urgent that we start doing any planning before we get the new city administrator in here. I think it's more handling the permitting process.
It is to a certain extent. We're struggling with the planning side and zoning.
Well, we may be struggling, but I think there's got to be some other alternatives besides, and I'm not saying we don't need the service. I'm just saying we don't need the service from this particular company. And I appreciate the work y'all put in. I know y'all are you don't take too many coffee breaks during the morning or in the afternoon. I realize that. But I just have a problem with the company. When I owned my own business, if I got taken advantage, I didn't go back there, to be taken advantage again. And again, I have trouble believing, I'm not saying you didn't live, but I'm just having trouble believing that somewhere there isn't a good, reputable company that we could also use if we needed. I don't have a problem with the concept. I have a problem with who we're looking to deal with.
Exactly. I don't support this. I think we should look at some other companies and some other options, but it's up to this council, their decision. I think it's mixed as far as how everybody feels. How do you feel, Paul? What's your take on this?
I know that we need the help. I don't believe that this is our only option either.
Okay. Todd?
I'm torn in the middle of this as well.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we table this till the next meeting and ask for other options to be brought back to us?
I'll support that.
Can I have that in a form of a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we table this item tonight and give staff a couple weeks to explore possible alternatives for the next council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Okay. Moving on to item number 14. Any future agenda items?
Again, I brought these up again, but I'm still working on them. They're not easy. The sign ordinance, the relief calming traffic study, and code enforcement.
Okay.
And I was thinking of that planning thing, but we'll just table that for all.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes.
Mr. Dyer.
I asked at the last meeting that we put the RV park back onto the agenda, and it didn't get on this meeting, but I'd like to see it put on the next one.
Okay.
Specifically to talk about the last 6 months' occupancy rates. I'd also like the staff to explain how we verify that people who are staying in the park have paid, because I have seen and heard from a number of citizens and even from city staff that we're having a problem because we don't have any way to check to see that the person who's in there has paid.
Okay. So that's your RV park item. I don't think we need to discuss it.
No, I just wanted,
okay.
The second thing I'd like to ask to be put on the next meeting, I would like to have a discussion about Castroville utility solar power policy, because we have a growing number of citizens that are investing large sums of money to put solar power panels on their homes, and then they come to the city, and the people that I've spoken with are a little concerned, and so it's something that we probably ought to have a policy discussion about.
Okay. Anybody else?
All right.
We good? Okay, moving on to item number 15, adjourn. 7:12 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Sure.